Like a lot of camera nerds, I do enjoy a good rumour like the best of them. But some of these respected YouTubers have really jumped in at the deep end, because they've made some big assumptions, and in some cases financial decisions, based solely on a leak alone. And it doesn't matter how good a leak is if it doesn't tell you the full story. Of course, I know you know which channel to watch if you want the real story. It's Gerald Undone, obviously. Ta-da! So the real story, and the assumption that many people seem to get wrong, is that the launch of a GH5 Mark II doesn't mean there won't be a GH6. And Panasonic Lumix are actually signalling their continued support for the Micro Four Thirds format by telling us about two new cameras. The heavily leaked GH5 Mark II, but also the top secret GH6, which will be with us before the end of this year. Now, I can't tell you much about this GH6, especially as it's just a photo stuck to my old GH4, but we can have a closer look at this dark photo, and we've been given a couple of specs, a bit as a tease. Clearly aimed to attract video users, it'll have a new sensor and a new image processor that'll give us cinema 4K using 422 10-bit at up to 60p with zero heating issues. It'll have high frame rates of 4K up to 120 frames per second, all at 10-bit. And it'll also record 5.7K at 60p. Obviously, I've been pushing the brightness of this photo to see if there's any other clues we can learn about the GH6, but all we know for certain is that the name badge is in the same style as the S5. And I think the family resemblance is probably quite relevant, because in many ways it's the huge success of the small, great value full-frame S5, which has caused some to cast doubt on the viability of the whole Micro Four Thirds format. While we all ponder that thought, I'll move on to the new camera we can see today, the GH5 Mark II. Physically, it looks much the same as the GH5 Mark I. There's a couple of new red bits. The flippy screen is higher resolution, and it looks noticeably brighter to me as well. The battery is the larger 2200 mAh version, same as in an S5, which is useful, but it might wind you up if you've already got a lot of GH5 batteries. But the USB-C connector can now charge the battery and power the camera in use, which is really useful because you used to need a dummy battery for those long lives or things like time-lapse. And there's more changes inside. Although it's the same sensor as the original GH5, it now has an anti-reflective coating. They've squeezed another few stops of noticeable improvement out of the IBIS system. You now get Vlog-L included as standard. I think it should have been included as standard on the GH5 right from the start, but that's another story. But the Vlog-L is now much more usable because you can shoot 4K or Cinema 4K at 25p, 30p, 50p up to 60p and all in 10-bit. It's the 10-bit that's important. So I thought I'd give that a test, and I'd shoot some 4K at 50p in 10-bit using Vlog-L. I'd also do it all handheld on what seemed to be the windiest day of the year so far. Seriously, I had trouble standing up. That IBIS is amazing. It's still class leading, and the video lock mode is like having a built-in tripod. I think shooting log is only really useful once you've got 10-bit. So the inclusion of 50p 4K at 10-bit is a useful upgrade. A small improvement I do like, especially on days like that, is that you can now have a red border around the whole screen while you're recording. We've also got a couple of new photo styles, and we now have version 2 of the Cinelight D and V, so that's D2 and V2, just like the S5. The pandemic and recent lockdowns have changed the way many people work with video. Live video isn't just for vloggers anymore. And I wonder if that's why Lumix have now made it really easy for you to stream live video from the GH5 II. There's a new Lumix Sync App which you can install onto your Android or iOS phone, link the GH5 II and stream in full HD to the world, all without a cable. Obviously you could just stream live video from your phone, but if you want to up your picture quality game, then the GH5 II does make it very easy. All of these things, they're worthwhile improvements, but what you really want to know about is the autofocus system. And basically, the GH5 Mark II inherits the same improved autofocus system that we first saw on the S5. And I realise I took some heat for saying that the S5 autofocus system wasn't just improved, I said it was good. But I stand by those results that I've found. And I think the improved autofocus system we saw on the S5 is a noticeable improvement for normal video users. The S5 system, with its face, eye, head, body and animal detect, has been firmware updated on the S1, the S1H and now the GH5 II. It'll also be firmware updated on the GH5S and the G9 next month. I tested it on the GH5 II in exactly the same way as I did on the S5, with the custom AF settings putting the sensitivity high at +3 and the speed slow at -3. And I got a very organic feeling to the focus performance. The speed might be a little slow like this, but it responds in a pleasing way to my eyes. I found the autofocus performance on this GH5 II, if anything, to be slightly better than the S5. But is the autofocus as good as the newer Sony or Canon cameras? Honestly, no. But I did find it perfectly usable for video and a noticeable improvement. Just after I did that test, Panasonic sent me the release version 1 of the firmware. So I'm now looking again, but with all the custom settings turned off. This is everything set to the default out-of-the-box values. What do you think? Is the AF system working? The new firmware for the GH5S, the one I mentioned earlier that gives it the same AF performance, will also give the GH5S the ability to output RAW over HDMI. So you'll be able to record 12-bit RAW onto your Atomos Ninja 5 in the same way as you can with the S5. Happy days. So the big question is, why release a GH5 Mark II when you know that a GH6 is coming by the end of the year? Well, I don't think this camera is intended to be an upgrade for existing GH5 owners. Although the improvements are all very worthwhile and impressive, they're not enough on their own to make me want to upgrade. I think this camera is intended to attract new users to the format. So the real question is, why would you buy Micro Four Thirds instead of full frame? Well, the cost of a camera is much more than the cost of the body alone. And there's a lot of great Micro Four Thirds lenses out there, so the total cost of ownership could be a real factor. Also, I know people who don't need or want full frame at all, even for aesthetic reasons. It's probably best explained by remembering the choices that filmmakers used to have to make. If you were shooting a drama or something arty, you'd probably choose Super 35 for all the same reasons that we choose full frame today. But if you're shooting a documentary, you might prefer Super 16. And it's not just for size and cost reasons. You might also want the deeper depth of field that Super 16 gives you. maybe we should think of Micro Four Thirds as the new Super 16 format. Maybe these are documentary cameras. I know people who are working in network TV news now who love the Micro Four Thirds format, and they love what these cameras can do for news. Because you're watching this channel, you're probably not a new user, and you might be underwhelmed by the GH5 II because you've got a GH5. In which case, great. You've still got a wonderful documentary camera, and besides, you'll probably wait for the GH6. It's a shame I don't have more details about the new GH6. But I enjoy a good rumour, so I thought I'd take a risk. Ruffle a few feathers, start some of my own. A man I know has a friend who works in the nail bar down at the Lumix Engineering Centre. And they say they've seen plans for a brand new 16K sensor. And this has got quadruple base ISOs. They're also working on a new PDAF system. Now, I don't want to bore you with too many details, but that's Pigeon detect autofocus. With face eye tracking turned on, the processor superimposes a sunflower seed onto the rear monitor. And when the included hungry pigeon pecks many times a second at the seed, it's tapping the touchscreen, so the AF knows exactly where to track. I believe they're already working on a version 2 of this system, which is twice as responsive. It uses 2 pigeons. Now, I've oversimplified this, so it's probably best not to tell too many YouTubers. But if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.